everybody. Are you having fun at Lattice? Oh, come on. I know it's after lunch, but like, seriously. Woo! Yeah. Well, we are about to dive into a really fun conversation about the secret of total rewards and unlocking all of the insights around how to do total rewards well. So joining me today, we've got Brandon Weber, the CEO and co-founder of Nava Benefits. Brandon. We also have Rebecca Tenenbaum, the Senior Director of People at Guideline. And last but not least, we also have Deborah Hanus, the CEO and co-founder of Sparrow. Woo-hoo. All right, well, before we dive in, maybe let's spend a couple quick seconds telling the audience about who you are and why you're passionate about total rewards. Deborah, do you want to get us started?
Absolutely. My name is Deborah. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sparrow, which makes it simple for companies to provide their employees with leave. And my background is in software and engineering, but I would say something about me is that I love feedback. We actually purchased Lattice before we were 10 employees when we just had pre-seed funding, and made sure that it was one of the first things that we covered in our new hire onboarding. Mm-hmm. So we really just wanted to make sure that everyone has that support that they need.
Cool. Love that.
Yeah, my name is Rebecca Tenenbaum. I lead the people team at Guideline. A lot of our employees actually call me RT because we have 3 Rebeccas on the senior leadership team. So initials help with a little clarity there. Guideline is a retirement platform that provides 401k and IRA to small and mid-sized business. So I've been there about 6 years, have seen lots and lots of iterations of total rewards, and I'm super excited to be here for this conversation.
Love it. I'm Brandon Weber, CEO, co-founder of Nava Benefits. I guess my fun fact is I got into benefits because I'm really interested in fixing healthcare. And how do you help employees and their family members make better decisions when it comes to using their healthcare? And that brings me to Nava. So Nava is a technology-enabled benefits brokerage. And we leverage technology to help HR teams make better decisions at renewal and then help employees and their family members make better decisions throughout the year using their benefits. And I think this topic is very relevant to what we do every single day. We're going into Q4. We're in the middle of the Super Bowl of renewals, and total rewards is on the top of every single one of our clients' minds and my mind as the CEO of a fast-growing business as we work on trying to build world-class benefits for our own employers.
The Super Bowl of total rewards. That's a great way to characterize it.
El Meza quote.
Going to recycle that content. Okay, so as we dive in, we thought it would be helpful to align on what we mean by total rewards. So this is how we are thinking of it. And simply put, it's the combination of both monetary and non-monetary incentives that an employee earns at a company, right? Second slide here, and this will be the last slide, and then it's a true conversation that we'll be having. We wanted to talk about the changing landscape of total rewards, right? And so pre-pandemic, you see there on the left that we had cash-based comp. A lot of folks thought about total rewards in terms of cash, medical, dental, vision. And yes, some companies got a little bit more creative, but for the most part, there wasn't a lot of customization. Enter then the pandemic. And the pandemic really was this jolting experience for our world, and that created an opportunity for companies like some of the ones represented here to really think very differently about the total reward package. And so that's what we're gonna dive into a little bit more today. All right. So you as leaders have talked about total rewards. How has your thinking evolved over the last several years? And Rebecca, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind as Gianna was just talking about kind of pre and post pandemic. It's moved beyond compensation and medical insurance. There's lots of ancillary benefits to consider. That's probably number one. And number two is that it's not just always the Super Bowl. Like, we're thinking about total rewards all the time now. So when is the right time for this particular benefit? When should we be looking at this? When do you kick off the process? What's working, what's not? I think one of the biggest changes is that continual evaluation, not just the kind of set it and forget it that we could get away with 5 and 10 years ago.
Deborah, I know in the leave space, you've had some interesting thoughts in the evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I would build off of what Rebecca said in that there really is, everyone has gotten more creative in thinking about how they can support their employees holistically without necessarily spending more money. And I would say one example of this that we've seen work well is creativity within the leave space. Some people think a leave policy is sort of set it or forget it. If you have 12 weeks, 16 weeks, you're done. But actually, there are a lot of things that you can do to signal that you care just by making specific situations very clear. An example of this is that people often don't think about it. We're currently in Domestic Violence Awareness Month, is safe leave, which all safe leave says is that you can use sick days that you already have to be able to manage your health and safety. If you're in a situation like that, having a leave policy like that is written so you don't have to go ask for it or have a complicated conversation can do so much to support your employees. But it doesn't necessarily cost anything else to have thought through and communicated that situation to your employees. So I would say that we found really thinking through the communication and making sure that you understand how you can support employees in all sorts of different ways is really something that seems to be top of mind for both us and a lot of our customers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Could I touch on that?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
I think one of the things that I get really excited about sort of this post-pandemic total rewards is like it is like a proliferation of new high-impact benefits that you can offer to folks. And to me, it's actually what we see, sort of we represent HR leaders in the design and deployment of benefits plans, is it's also one of the most, I think one of the bigger tailwinds for empowering people operations in HR to just make a big impact on the organization, right? Because the bucket of levers that you can pull inside of benefits and total rewards has grown a lot. I think the other thing that we're seeing on the flip side is like with that growth, there's a lot more money being spent, a lot of opportunity to spend money. I think is the need to really understand return on investment. I think there's a sort of a fatigue around point solutions and trying to figure out what's working well. And I think that the overall decision-making kind of matrix of like, how do we pick across a growing landscape? I just saw a stat that the average employer today now offers 14 distinct benefits, to their employees. 10 years ago, it was 5. And so that's like a 2.5x, increase in richness, but also complexity. And so we think a lot in our role as advisor around how do we actually build a data-driven case for any one of those, either to grow or to shrink, but then also how do we build a plan to actually educate the audience on how to use all this stuff, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, but it's kind of a couple of shifts.
Yeah. Well, so you've touched a little bit on employee perceptions, right? And so, Rebecca, you had mentioned a few minutes ago how you are addressing this post-pandemic. So can you talk a little bit about how you're addressing some of these changes that you're seeing, these needs, mental health and otherwise, that you're seeing from employees?
Yeah, I think same. Like it's the continual reevaluation of what you're offering to people. But I think the shift we've seen in employees is they're paying more attention. So the pandemic forced everybody to look at how is my employer supporting me? How am I going to make this possible? And now on the other side of that, how do we continue to make it possible? How do we continue to support people? And so employees they're doing more math. They're paying attention. They really want to understand their total package in a way that we haven't really seen before. And I know Guideline is a particular set of 401k nerds, but I had a new hire, entry-level CS employee say, "Hey, is our 401k a safe harbor plan?" I was like, wow, we have entered a new era. Because they know the details, they're reading the articles, they're asking the questions and digging in. So we got to meet them where they're at, and really make sure that we're putting materials out there that make sense.
That resonates. I can go a little bit. I think to build off of that, I think the one stat that keeps me up at night and also gets me really excited is that it's like 65% of employees value health and well-being over salary when choosing where to go and whether they stay. And so you sort of go, okay, that's really interesting and compelling. And I think that what we're seeing is the need for employees to really buy into. They interrogate like much deeper into the benefits plan, and they need a really good storyline for like how this is sort of making an impact on them. I'll say like one other thing that I think is coming out of this too is a bit more of a desire for sort of like choose your own adventure benefits. Like my specific needs as a young family trying to have a kiddo are so different than your specific needs as an individual trying to, grow your career, get fit, et cetera. And so how do you manage that, Rubik's Cube of like personalization inside of this kind of, this complex benefits kind of landscape? I think those are two big things that we're hearing.
Just building off of that, I would say that it does, we've seen the same thing. Like people, they really want to understand their benefits.
Yeah.
And with that, we found, I think, if you can't give someone choose your own adventure, you can do a lot by helping them understand the why. And just every single touch point, every time you're working with them, making sure that you explain why. Why can't we give you that benefit that you really want? Well, what we've done is we've looked at our benefit survey, and we are maximizing our budget to do as much as possible for everyone, and just making sure that you're communicating those touch points at every single point can really do a lot to help people to understand the company's point of view and what it is they can and cannot do.
Yeah. One other thing that was interesting, had a conversation in the hallway, and someone mentioned, they were like, the power of these new benefits to like really change lives is so compelling. And, but then it sort of brings with it like a responsibility to, sort of explain what, they gave an example, like commuter benefits. That's interesting and useful. GLP-1s or enabling a family to have a child who couldn't through fertility or IVF, that is a life-changing type of opportunity, and I think that's really exciting. I think in this category. But the knock-on effect is you are having employees come in and go, what's your strategy around GLP-1s and fertility, and an HR leader is like 65 employees and a team of one and whatnot. And so I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do is figure out how do we really optimize that bucket of spend in a way that truly, and I play the role of CEO, I interacted with my leadership team on going, okay, how do we spend those dollars really wisely? Because there's just a lot more impact I think you can make too. And if you're not careful, you can spend a lot of money with sort of a low ROI, like things that folks aren't using. So I think that's really interesting right now. And the math problem is much harder, I guess, is what I'm saying, when you're looking at across a lot of different benefits.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads me to the next question, which is, we're going off script a little bit here, so just to prepare you all. So you've talked about making sure we as leaders are offering benefits that matter to employees. So how do you unearth what matters to employees? Like, how do you go about understanding what your employees want and what's really going to move the needle? Because at the end of the day, you have a finite set budget for benefits and total reward. So how do you know what matters?
Do you want to kick that? I'm happy to kick it off.
Yeah.
I think this is like a core part of what we try to do for folks, because I think you just got to gather the data. So I think there's sort of three things that we recommend as sort of the playbook. We do it internally at Nava. One is the pulse survey, and I know a lot of folks will nod. Yep, that's obvious. I will bet 60 to 70% of employers just don't even do it. They just do not. They don't gather the data from their employees around sentiment. And I think there's a right way to do that. There's a wrong way to do that, which maybe, Deborah, you can touch on when we get to you. I think the second thing is actually evaluating the real engagement and usage with your existing benefits. We do that for our clients. We think that that's sort of the job of the modern benefits broker. And I think the third thing, which is really interesting, is actually analyzing the questions that your employees have that are coming in throughout the year as it relates to their benefits. So if people are really confused around 401k or HSA use, et cetera, there's an opportunity to not just sort of make benefits plan decisions, but also make communication education decisions. And so the Nava Benefits app sort of gathers that data anonymously. We look at it, we use that as sort of the third input to, to gathering sentiment and guiding strategy. So that's kind of our playbook.
Yeah, and I would just echo, just do it. You need the data. You need the data to make your case. You need the data to support what you're recommending. Total rewards is the biggest lever we have to retain employees, to attract talent, to ultimately hit our business goals. So that data is critical. And the thing that I hear most often when I talk to folks is, we're not going to get the response rate. Like, we're going to get 10%, 20% of people that respond. So then it just turns into a comms problem, right? Like, how are you letting people know this is your opportunity to influence how we're going to spend what is a giant pot of money for all sizes of employers? If 5 employees or 2,000, like, it's a lot of money. It's a huge line item. And you want to provide the things that people want. So making sure that you're having those conversations and they really understand where that input's going and that it matters and you're going to use that information. Deborah, I know you're passionate about the survey creation itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that it's, first, I co-sign everything both of them said. And it is, the data is, having the right data is so incredibly important to make those decisions. Like, first, that response rate, like, there are things you can do to get close to 100% response rate. Like, your managers need to care, your leadership needs to care, and you need to remind people daily that you care. Like, what we do at our company is we have, like, the leadership essentially, like, takes on the announcer persona of a horse race. Team A is coming up against Team B, photo finish. That's one thing. Second, I have an anecdote that I can add to this, which is years ago when our head of people and I were running our first benefits survey, she was a team of 1. I didn't want her to spend a lot of time on it. I was like, can you try to find something somewhere else that you can use instead? And she looked, and she probably spent as much time as finding a survey, writing her own survey, looking, because everything was but most of the surveys were of the format like, do you want mental health app? Do you want gym app? And of course, everyone says yes. Because of course, I mean, if I filled that out, I want everything. You don't necessarily know what, but really, that's not the problem that Total Rewards is solving. That's not the problem that our people team is solving. The problem is like, we have a finite budget and we want to support everyone in the moments that matter as effectively as possible. So what our head of people did, she's amazing, was she put together a survey that was focused on trade-offs and the things that we could actually do something about. Things like, would you rather have a premium for dependents that looks like this, or would you rather us approach co-pays like that? Of X, Y, and Z, what are the top 2 benefits that you care about? So that we could really understand how people are thinking about it. That's one aspect of the data. And the second aspect of the data, I know you talked about making sure, looking at how people are using things as well, because sometimes people say, yes, I need a mental health wellness app, but then they never log in. So actually going back, looking for what people think they need, and then looking for what they're actually using. But as you said, Brandon, the way you bridge that gap is by educating people. Because sometimes people, they think they need it, but they can't figure out how to log in, and then they just never try again.
So true. I think just one thought that was triggered there. I think this is, to me, I think a part of this conversation, even the whole day, is sort of, there's a moment like people operations, HR is increasingly just important to the strategic success of the organization in so many different ways. And I think there was a really cool thread in the keynote with sort of AI and the importance of this function to kind of guide the organization there. I think for me, when I sit as the CEO on my side of the table, and we're spending a lot of time guiding HR teams around this, is like, it is just, this whole business is moving toward a data-driven conversation, right? From intuition, from here's what it feels like, to here's what the data says. And so if you sort of like really embrace that, you're like, no, we're in a paradigm shift. The landscape has gotten wildly more complex, 2 to 3 times more sort of moving parts. The dollars, I mean, this is the second largest spend item when we talk about benefits behind headcount, and just approach it. I think you get to the conclusion, which is like, step 0, gather lots of data. And then step 1 is start to analyze that data, start to bring kind of points of view. And I, as a CEO, and I've got an incredible head of people operations too, Alana, and she brings the data. And it allows us to have just a much more informed conversation very early on in the process. So just double underline that. Get that moving.
Let me ask a follow-up question on that. So let's say that you've done the data gathering, and you learn that what matters to most of your employees is an offering that you don't currently offer, or you need to change the mix of the offering. We all know as HR practitioners that we have to very tactfully make changes because you want to avoid a situation where people feel as if the benefit is being taken away from them. So how do you navigate that fine line of asking, so getting what matters to people, getting that data that you speak of, and then tweaking or altering the offering without that being disruptive or perceived negatively?
I feel like we chatted about it. I feel like you had a great sort of perspective on that last time we talked.
I mean, we've chatted. So I would say be curious about the data for one, and you're moving the buckets around. But I think if everybody's saying that what they want are stronger mental health benefits, but nobody's using your current offering, like, get curious about that. You're not asking the right questions. Why is everybody asking for a benefit you feel you already offer? And so I think a lot of times if folks are asking for something that you're not offering, it goes back to the data and getting curious and really kind of digging in and what can you move around, formatting the survey in a way that you're asking those trade-off questions. What would people give up in order to put more money into an HSA account or whatever it is that folks are clamoring for?
Yeah, I think the other frame is framing decisions that we're making as fluid. Like we're going to try this for a year. We're going to gather the data. We're going to see how it works. Dare say we're going to run an experiment, and we're going to see if this works. So I think that's like one part, and we do that a lot internally. It's like, hey, this whole program is an evolution. Like, we're going to make decisions and changes as the team grows and data comes in. And I think the second part is show the data. Like, actually, like, hey, no one used this. That's why we're making a decision. But it's still hard, right? Like, if you get 2 people who are just like fanatical users of a program that doesn't scale, you still have to have conversations.
I would echo what both of them said, in that it really is, you need to think about, put yourself in the employee's headspace. And I think it all comes back to the communication, just continuously reminding that every time you talk about benefits, remind them that this is not forever. I mean, you actually revisit benefits every year. It also works in the reverse too. If only 2 people have been using something, but they really, really loved it, if more people want that next year, maybe it will come back. But as long as you're continually messaging the fact that this, like you said, this is a work in progress, not just once a year, but every time you think about benefits. At Sparrow, we actually have recurring meetings around benefits because new hires they all have too much in their brains already. So we tell them a little bit about benefits in the first week, and then we tell them more next month and more next month. So they spend the whole first year, making sure that they're becoming an expert in their benefits.
And I think COVID is kind of a natural inflection point where we all looked at benefits very carefully. What do we need now? How do we make this work? And then afterwards, we looked at, okay, we're post-COVID, what do we peel back? But even without COVID, your demographics are continually changing. Even if you tell me, we hired no one, we fired no one, well, everybody's a year older. So what impact does that have? You know, is it family planning? Is it L&D? Is it career? Like what is it? Your demographics are changing constantly. So COVID is a good wake-up call for all of us, and we had to get creative and we had to be scrappy. But there's the constant change that we need to be evaluating as leads.
Yeah, agreed. You know, one of the things that we hear people say they want is flexibility. And yes, that's hybrid remote, but I think it also post-pandemic encompasses a lot more than just the hybrid remote conversation. So how are you all thinking about flexibility as it pertains to total rewards?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when often when people think of flexibility, they think like, are you in the office? Are you working remotely? Are you at work? Are you not at work? Might sound like a broken record here, but I do think that a lot of this, you can reframe that a little bit like in terms of are people, when someone is off work, how can we make that as restorative as possible? And when someone is at work, how can we help make them productive, as productive as possible? And this is something that we think about a lot as a leave company. And with that, a few of things that we found are one, is really thinking carefully about that return to work. You know, so someone might need, depending on their circumstances, they might need a part-time return to work, for one. They might also need, different hours, a little bit more flexibility. But that's just one thing. Another thing is not making any assumptions about what it is they need. I think a very common thing that happens is people say, well, you have a newborn at home, so you definitely don't want to travel. But that is eliminating opportunities for that person, and actually, maybe that person really wants a break from their newborn. So just always ask. Don't assume what people need, and encourage managers to always ask because they're in an even better position than people ops. And the third is to remember that this person, whether it was a parental leave, a medical leave, a sabbatical, they've been away from the company for a while, and things have changed. Company priorities have probably changed depending on how quickly your team is growing. The team might have changed, their manager might have changed. And I think often we invest a lot in making sure that new hires get to know the company, they get to know priorities, they get to know values, but we just forget about people who are coming back from work. But if you've been gone for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, you're essentially coming back to a whole new company. And almost everything you do for new hires, you should still be doing for them. You can make sure if there are any changes to their management change, make sure you're introducing them. If there's anyone new on the team, encourage a coffee meetup. Help, really invest time in getting them ramped up and productive again.
Love that.
Yeah, and I think flexibility as a perk, it is a thing. Outside of leave even, how can you test those bounds? I mean, it doesn't work in all industries, but in a lot of our industries, we can have a more flexible schedule. We can allow some people to start earlier or to start later. We can allow, somebody to take their lunch at 4 o'clock so they can take a parent to a doctor's appointment. We can make that work, and if you can back it up with data that we're losing no productivity, we're actually engaging employees, and people are grateful for this flexibility. How do we push those boundaries? I think it's important to figure out what that brand, what that flavor is for your company.
The title of our session is around alignment and unlocking the secret to total rewards. And when we think about alignment, a lot of times it's aligning as a leadership team around what we're going to offer, because we can't offer everything. So we have a room full of people practitioners in the room. And so what are actionable pieces of insight and wisdom that you have for getting that alignment?
love that. Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put my CEO hat on here. And I think maybe two things that I think really have resonated with me, sort of both in our own journey at Nava, but then also serving hundreds of employers and HR teams in their journeys. I think one is just the importance of aligning with your CEO, C-suite, however you frame that, partnership on what are like the 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 big priorities or levers that you're going to focus on pulling in this upcoming sort of total rewards strategy push. And I think that, whether it's like we have a budget cap of X, or we are going to make sure we're going to focus on serving this population, whatever they are, just like really, really doing the work early to go, these are the 3 to 5 things we've really aligned on high level. Because those will be the pillars that sort of help us like kind of retouchstone together as we're going through the journey. Because as everyone here knows, just the business of like renewal negotiation, getting insurance quotes, hundreds of different vendors like in the picture, just gets wildly complex. You just can very quickly like miss the forest through the trees as you're sort of in the weeds of all this stuff. So I think touchstoning back on those 3 to 5 things, and here's how we're doing against that goal, et cetera, is like greatly helpful for myself in my seat. And I think allows the people team and people leadership to really sort of like continue to steer the ship and sort of bring us all back. And then I think the second thing is I deeply value just what I'd call constructive disagreement with my head of people. And we've got some Navanauts in the room here, and they all know her. And Alana is like very good at going, I disagree with your perspective, and let me share why. And we always get to a better place. And so like that's a thing that I just am like, I'm so like fired up about, and just wanting to encourage folks is like, that is just the 1 + 1 = 3 partnership. There's that sort of like productive disagreement, and we get to a better place as a result of it. And sort of underline that is usually the most valuable sort of asset that you can have in the people ops seat when you are disagreeing is data, context, anecdotes, like here's what we're seeing. Because us CEOs get very myopic, and like my tiny little worldview is like is the view inside the organization. You're like, no, not really. So anyway, those are a couple of things that are working for us.
Yeah. I would add, one thing that I would add just tactically is drive a calendar. We're talking about this flexibility. We're talking about looking at rewards throughout the year. Everybody has a careful plan for benefit plan design, in the fall, and what that all looks like. But what does it look like the rest of the year? What does your CFO need from you in Q1? How are you measuring the changes that you made, and if they're effective, so that you're not scrambling to do all of that at the end? Have an annual calendar. Build in the flexibility, but have that calendar that you're driving. And then who's the audience where? What does the CFO need? What does the CEO need? What does your team need alignment on? I think that really helps eliminate some of the scramble that can happen at the end, because fall is the Super Bowl. So I think that is really important.
Absolutely. And I just adding on what you said, Rebecca, I would say one thing we do very similar in trying to maintain a calendar, maintain a schedule. And also just throughout the year, we try to think of the whole employee experience as like taking a page from product management, and to think about, we often think about the user journey, but we don't always talk about the employee journey. Like, what are those moments that matter throughout the employee's time at the company? It's that first onboarding, meeting their manager, their first performance management conversation, that first promotion. You're really thinking as someone is with the company over an extended period of time, what do you want them to be experiencing? What do you want that to be like? And trying to build from there. And so I love your sort of time-based approach to this as well. I think that you can approach almost everything in total rewards through that lens. And then second, I would echo what Brandon said, in that it is what has been most important for me in staying aligned with our head of people is ensuring that we're speaking each other's language. Because sometimes you're not going to be, I have different goals than she has. And really that's true across the leadership team in the company. Everyone has different goals in some ways. They're the same goals at a high level. We're all working for the same mission. But sometimes she might have a different perspective than I do, and I think just being able to reframe things into the other person's viewpoint, not necessarily, like often a CEO might not care that a specific person is feeling a certain way, but if you think instead about not just how that person is feeling, but if you can reframe that into, well, going back to the data, this affects retention in this way, this affects performance in this way. Being able to frame it into how that other person is thinking about the situation and their goals can do so much to really get you to the right place and the right time.
I was just going to add on, thinking about that employee life cycle and not just alignment on what are we going to do next year, what changes are we going to make, what's next, but the alignment on how do you communicate total rewards broadly. You've made all the decisions, here it is. Who's saying what? How is this being communicated, and how does it continue to be communicated throughout the employee life cycle? It's starting all the way back with retraining your talent acquisition team. If you've got a slew of benefits on your website in October as they're recruiting that are going to be different on January 1st, they need to be having that conversation. I think we forget that touch point in the employee life cycle, and retraining talent acquisition, making sure that everybody's talking about things the same way, that you have that alignment in the comms, and what the strategy is. What's the philosophy? Why is this the right package for your company?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rebecca, that the employee life cycle begins pre-employment, right? And making sure that the talent acquisition team is clear on the rewards package and benefit offerings is really important. Yeah. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have time to answer any questions in the room. So are there any questions that folks have for our team of experts on the stage about total rewards? I don't know if there are mics around, but okay. Any questions
Don't be shy.
that folks have? Am I seeing? Oh, okay, in the front, yeah.
We're talking about the trade-off in bringing a new benefit on board and what an employee might choose to take offline, if you will. All benefits mean different things to different people. Have you gone through a tricky transition of a trade-off, and what was the messaging that you used that was effective, or maybe that wasn't very effective in that conversation?